Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Carol Lee, welcome.
Thanks for having me here.
What is happening to Chinatown? It's not the Chinatown that I remember of the 70s, 80s, and 90s where it was like going crazy. What's going on?
I think there's been a lot of factors that have led to its sort of gradual decline, and it's a very complicated problem. I think that, we have issues of, people becoming more prosperous, moving to Richmond. That's often an example that people cite. But, the pressures of gentrification, I think there's pressures from the downtown east side, and all of those that come with poverty and substance abuse, and mental health issues. So it's a challenge. Yeah.
But is it in decline or is it in transformation? Because if, let's say we take a look at the history of Chinatown, it's always been changing.
Yes.
So are we changing now, or are we changing in a way that causes you concern? What's your concern?
I think the concern that I would have is that, you're right, it's always been in this sort of state of transformation. But I think that if we look at the trajectory of where it could go, I think that's probably what causes me some concern about how do we preserve what is worth saving, but allow the natural sort of development progress to take place. And so it's like, how do you maintain that balance? So I started something called the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation, and our mission is to try and help revitalize the community while retaining its irreplaceable and unique cultural heritage.
So why is it important that we hang on to that heritage? Because there are, and you know as well as I do, there are elements of that heritage that harken back to days of extreme racism here in Canada. Is that something that we should be holding on to?
I think people are sort of past that, in the sense, of the races. Certainly the people I think about that grew up in Chinatown, which I did, don't think of it as that way. It's more a nostalgia about something that was, I think, important, something that was a vibrant community, something that celebrated our culture. And I don't think of it as sort of the association, and maybe I was too young, but to think about it from that standpoint of being, basically it was a ghetto. It was where the Chinese people that were coming from China had to live.
Like they had to live.
They had
no
to live
choice.
that. They had no choice. Yeah.
Like they were told, you have to be here.
Yes. We grew up in the British properties. The Chinese weren't, there's a covenant still that does not allow Chinese people to live there. So the place that they were allowed to live was in Chinatown.
It's my understanding we had the city, we had what was known as Skid Row, and then we had Chinatown. Like it was like that's how far outside of mainstream society those Chinese, and they were primarily men, right? And where did they come from?
Well, a lot of them came from southern China, and that would have included my two grandfathers. So they thought that the opportunity in Canada was much better. So in my paternal grandfather, he was, I guess, nominated as the most able-bodied young person. They bought a one-way ticket for him to come to Canada, and if he was successful, they were obligated to send money back to the village, which he did for the rest of his life.
Really? And so what kind of work did he do when he came here? He and along with the others that came with him?
Yeah, usually started out as sort of doing, either menial labor, or I think my grandfather, he started out as a sort of as a houseboy, is what you call, so he worked for family, and then gradually worked up. And I think that the church played a big role back then as well. So both my grandfathers learned how to speak English, at the local church. And I think that they taught them more than English. I think that, there was people who were very welcoming and tried to help integrate them into the community.
Well, there were some, but
there were
not,
some,
but not everyone.
There were some at the church. Yeah.
It disturbs me when I take a look at the relationship between sort of colonial British colonialism and those first immigrants from China who came here. There was, before the Exclusion Act, there was a covenant that was signed by many business people in town saying, we, the undersigned, agree that we will not do business with people who are of Chinese origin nor will we do business with anybody who does business with people who are Chinese. And yet, in that environment, these people still survived.
And actually thrived. You know, it's funny, I don't really ever think of it in that way, because if you think about the context of where the world was, we only got the civil rights legislation passed in the U.S. in 1964. I mean, so I don't look at it from that way. That was the way the world works. And my grandfathers both paid, I think they both paid the head tax, and it was, if they had to do it all over again, it was still a great investment to come to this country. And I think that in some ways, Chinatown is a recognition of the physical, the sacrifice and that people made, but it's also a testament to how well I think Canada eventually, how well they embraced them and how integrated they are into the community. So in this little one enclave, I think, wow, we had 3 university chancellors, you know, Milton Wong, Brant Louis, who are both chancellors of SFU, and my father, who was the chancellor, became chancellor of UBC. So that in itself was not necessarily, you know, a bad thing. They did thrive.
Oh, it's interesting.
And I think in a way have contributed a lot back to the country that in the beginning actually didn't want them to come.
And perspective is everything, isn't it? Because when I look back at that, I think, oh my gosh, like there's a part of me that's almost ashamed by it. But as you say, okay, but that was the world.
That was the world.
And
I think we've done better than most countries in the world in terms of the eventual acceptance and integration of minorities coming to this country.
So the first, you know, Chinatown was about 90 to 100 people, I understand. It was quite a small group of men who were primarily working in the sawmills, and they had come from having built the railroad. Extraordinary work ethic and sense of determination.
They were. It actually was a good race for Canada to come in and help them build the country. So I just you think about it, and that's why to me Chinatown in some ways is important, because it is that physical sort of legacy, so to speak, of what the contribution was. So they did help build not only the city and the province, but they were an integral piece of actually connecting BC with the rest of Canada, which was one of the, I think, the precursors to Confederation.
I got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
Pao Wu, you know, at HQ Vancouver, contends that we have always been an Asian city. The reason that the railroad was built to Vancouver was to connect us with Asia. And so how fitting it is that it was Asian men who completed that railroad. And so the goal was never just to get to Vancouver, it was to open up global markets. And so this has been a precursor to the position that we find ourselves in now. So we move forward. The head tax goes out of the way. The Exclusion Act is gone. We get to the reunification in the 1960s. Now, all of a sudden, the spouses of these men who have been here on their own for a long time come to Vancouver, and Chinatown starts to change. It becomes this dynamic, thriving, like sort of lifeblood of the center of the city. What was it like then on the streets? Like, what was going on?
I would say that probably was sort of around the peak of Chinatown.
The golden years.
The golden years, you know, with a lot of nightlife and activity and restaurants, and you know, we used to go there at 2 a.m. and we would go get a snack. I mean, it was a friendly and very safe place to go. I think that you know, it's interesting to watch evolutions of either cities or places, and there was definitely, you know, a movement away from that. There was no longer the enclave, because the people that actually grew up living there could actually move away, and so that's what a lot of them did.
Well, that was part of the goal, wasn't it?
That was part of the goal. If you became successful, you certainly didn't want to stay in Chinatown.
Well, I understand that Chinese Shaughnessy was over 33rd and Cambie area.
That's around where both of my grandparents lived.
Yeah. And so many people who started to prosper then moved out of Chinatown. But still the commerce thrived, and it was like day and night.
Day and night. In fact, I think during the 70s and 80s, it was some of the most expensive real estate in the city.
In Chinatown.
Yeah, in Chinatown.
But then things started to change. We had Expo 86. Chinatown played a role there. We had the Dr. Sun Yat-sen Gardens built. It really looked like we were connecting with our collective, I guess, history or linkage to Asia. But then something happened. What started to happen?
It was a multitude of problems that led to sort of the place that we find ourselves in today. And there's no easy fix for complex problems, and I think that's part of it. But you've got a lot of poverty in the neighborhood, and as I said earlier, issues related to that. So, we have housing issues, we have, issues with substance abuse, mental health. So social issues that are very complex and very difficult and challenging. It's hard for me to put my finger on just like one thing.
But those issues were always there anyways, because Chinatown always like bordered right up against Skid Row.
Always, and it was a very harmonious, I think, coexistence. I mean, I still feel that Chinatown and downtown East Side, they were one community. There was no, that's kind of a functional divide that, people perhaps in the city
it's a lane way away when you look through Pender Street.
Exactly, it's just one lane way away. But when we grew up, I mean, it was very fluid. And yes, there was poverty, but it was different than the way it is, today. There was a lot of seasonal workers, people, longshoremen or loggers living in what were before, reasonably nice hotels where you could stay for, short-term accommodation. I'm not sure what happened. I think that people sometimes say it was the closing of Riverview. So there was, no place for people to go, and they ended up gravitating towards the downtown East Side. And so,
well, former Police Chief Jim Chu, in a conversation that we had before, said nobody anticipated that with the closing of Riverview that we would wind up over time seeing those people who fell through the cracks, like in the system, ultimately winding up with nowhere else to go. So they would wind up on the downtown East Side. And as he pointed out, who was waiting for them? Nobody other than your friendly neighborhood drug dealer, saying, well, you've got a friend in me. And that started to exacerbate the problem. But at the same time, there seemed to be a much greater focus on, well, let's support the downtown East Side. Let's give the people who live there the services that they need. And it was as though in doing that, we shifted a fair bit of energy and focus to the downtown East Side and forgot that right next door is Chinatown. Is that what happened?
There's some truth in that. And they've been very good at advocating, what was required. And I think, to help the community. And I think Chinatown has been less effective in advocating what is it that we need to try and keep the community alive.
I got to take our second break at the moment. We'll be right back.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
And if there was that golden era of Chinatown that stretched right through to the late 90s, and people, as you pointed out, started moving away, those who prospered moved away, then it leaves a vacuum behind.
It did. And it was interesting. Some of the young people that I work with, they asked me, they said, why didn't they do a better job of sort of passing it over to us? And I said, but once again, I said, think about the context. This was a place that they actually wanted to leave once they became successful because of the reason why they had to be there in the first place. So I think it's just now become sort of more of a realization that, no, it was actually kind of an amazing place, amazing community with a very vibrant and unique culture, and that's worth saving.
So what is it that we need to do to get that spirit back, and to attract, Chinese businesses to come back and say, we're going to open storefronts, we're going to get people on the street?
So this is something I've thought a lot about, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to take this first leap in trying, how can we attract businesses to go down and show them that they can be successful? And so as part of something I did personally, I actually am starting 2 or 3 restaurants. So the first one is going to open in October, or actually no, probably more like November, a traditional Chinatown barbecue restaurant. And
you're going into the restaurant business. Why is it important that you go into the restaurant business if your effort is to try and revitalize the energy of Chinatown?
Because I think restaurants and food are very foundational and fundamental to a well-functioning Chinatown. And we've just been seeing businesses leaving. The traditional businesses were leaving, and the ones that were coming back were not really Chinese businesses, which is wonderful that they saw an avenue and a place to come and be successful. But if we don't balance it with some Chinese businesses, then it all of a sudden has the potential to become just another community like anywhere else in Vancouver. And I think so often in life you don't appreciate what you've got or how special something is until it's too late, until it's gone. So I've been surprised over the last 3 or 4 years. I've sort of been on this path to see how can we all work together to revitalize. How many people are actually interested in helping save Chinatown?
So when we take a look at the revitalization of, let's say, Gastown or
Yes.
Yaletown, which then started to bring locals into the area, are you seeing something of that scale?
Not yet.
No.
I mean, I think that there's still a perceived sense of Chinatown is not safe. And in some ways, maybe it's not just a perception. I mean, I think that, lately there probably has more been going on down there, and it's a lot of pressure from just the various neighborhoods.
The history of Chinatown and its role in the past and moving forward is fascinating. Unfortunately, I got to get you to hang on for one last break. We'll be back in a moment.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
But if you go down to Chinatown during the day, the stores are still open. Like there's all those different food vendors and a wide variety of different merchants, and they're open. You go there. There's a fair bit of activity on the street. It doesn't feel unsafe. But what I found interesting is you go there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and all of a sudden it's all shuttered up. Like
There's nobody there. Nobody there.
And for a place that used to have such a vibrant nightlife,
That was a place to go
yeah.
at night. No, everything basically shuts down at 6 o'clock. So hopefully we'll be able to change that. So one of the other businesses that I bought was the old Ho Ho restaurant, which is, I guess, pretty iconic. It's been around for about 70 years.
Right.
And hopefully we'll be able to
And it was a victim
attract.
of those changes. And you're hoping to turn that around.
We'll give it a good old try.
So most people go into the restaurant business because they have a passion for restauranting, not because they're trying to save a neighborhood. But that's what's driving you to say, let's get people back here to...
But I think that's one of the easiest ways to get people back. I mean, Chinatown was always a very welcoming neighborhood for everybody of any kind, any economic background, any ethnic group. I mean, it was for families. It was for everybody. Everybody I knew who grew up in Vancouver had some sort of experience of going down to Chinatown. And I think it's our job to give them a reason to come back.
So I also note that City Hall is allowing for the development of properties there that aren't necessarily in keeping with the spirit of the architecture, that sort of Mediterranean look.
And it's very unique to Vancouver.
Very unique.
Yeah.
And so we want to be able to protect that. What role does City Hall play in this?
I think a really important role, and because we're for development. I mean, we have to continually evolve. I think as long as the development is in keeping with the spirit of Chinatown, I think, as you say, and sensitive to that, we have to welcome that. So,
So
It's-
why with your foundation then are you also targeting like the redevelopment of resources down on the downtown east side? Like that's not Chinatown, that's the downtown
No.
east side. Why is it important that you pay attention there as well?
well, in some ways, as I said earlier, it is almost in some ways one neighborhood. I grew up that way. It was sort of this, it was the same neighborhood. And Chinatown cannot be vibrant unless we have a healthy downtown east side. And I think vice versa. So we felt that a housing and a world-class community health center would be a good way to sort of help change and improve the living conditions for the people in the downtown east side, which
So
indirectly and directly improves Chinatown.
So that's 58 West Hastings.
Yes.
And tell me what that is going to look like and who are your partners on that?
So we'll probably build between 250 and 300 new units of housing.
Wow.
It'll have a 55,000 square foot integrated health facility that will be run by Vancouver Coastal Health. And so they've basically been our partner in that, and we work very closely with the City of Vancouver as well.
That's an ambitious project.
It is.
but it's designed at helping to preserve Chinatown and at the same time meet the needs of those in the downtown east side.
We hope that it's beneficial for the entire neighborhood.
But most important is that we get more people to remember that Chinatown is a part of our collective heritage and to go down there,
Yes.
like put feet on the street.
Come down.
Yeah, because
Visit
then it
us.
gets safer, that
Yeah.
it supports businesses and so on.
It's really the lifeblood. I mean, unless you can have a constant stream of people coming down, I mean, the neighborhood really won't be able to support itself on the little community that lives there. So we rely on people coming from, the greater Vancouver area. We rely on tourists to a big extent. It's surprising, even with the sort of the decline of Chinatown, I think it's still like the top 5 or 10 tourist destinations in Vancouver.
And are you noticing a change? Are people now starting to talk about Chinatown going, oh yeah? Or is it still early days in that process?
I think it's still early days, but the media has helped a lot. There's been a number of things, conversations like this help. The newspapers have written about it lately, and so it's more on people's mind, I think, because many people have not been here for a long time.
So a lot of people look at Chinatown and they think, okay, well, it's Chinese, but like whose Chinatown is it anyways?
It's everybody's. I mean, Chinatown was always for everybody, even if it was mostly Chinese people that lived there, even if it was mostly Chinese stores that were operated there. It was for everybody.
Well, Carol, I wish you a lot of luck in what you're doing because it's not going to be easy.
No.
And you're a one-woman force of nature trying to change the trend. And I wish you all the best.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks.